Hello,
A big hello from Sugar and
Spice.
so
So we are back with two more interesting stories, short ones, but I'm sure you're all going to enjoy. So sit back and enjoy these stories. The first story is by Shrija. Go ahead, Shrija.
so shall I get started?
Yes.
Yeah, so we picked out two, of course, as usual, two very interesting stories. And this time I thought I'll narrate one from the Arabian Nights because that's one thing which, I
Yes, we
haven't,
all
yeah,
love.
we've never touched and we've always liked. There are so many stories, I'm sure we haven't read all of them. But this one, this particular one that I'm going to share with you today, is something that impacted me a lot in my childhood, and I realize now, even as an adult, uh, the different levels of messages that it conveyed. So, this one is one of the adventures that Sinbad the sailor had. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the name, and there are so many stories, interesting stories, fantastic stories that Sinbad has had adventures. In this particular one, uh, he was rescued from a previous incident with a big bird called the Rock. Of course, that's a story for another day. And the sailors who rescued him, they were all on the ship. And as they were going through, as you know, uncharted waters, exploring, they passed a couple of uninhabited islands. So on at one particular island they decided to get onto the island and explore. Sinbad was still recovering from his previous adventure, you could say misadventure, so he was on the boat, and these sailors left for a while, and when they came back they were full of excitement. So he asked them, what did you find? Did you find something interesting on that island? There's nobody living there. So they said, yes, we did. We thought there was nothing when we discovered this mound at a distance. And we approached the mound. Now, when Sinbad heard this, keeping in his mind the previous experience that he had, he was a little worried. And he said, and what happened? Did you go to the mound? His heart was sinking when he asked because he knew what to expect. And they said, yes, we did. And when we went, we found that it had no door. It was a huge mound. So we used our swords to cut through. That again brought the sinking feeling to Sinbad's heart. He was worried. And he said, then what did you do? So they said, we broke it open. And when we went inside, we found some delicious yellow golden food. It was so delicious. It was almost like, egg yolk. It was that good. And Sinbad shook his head and says, oh, you stupid men, don't you know what you've gone and done? That is yolk. It's not golden food. It's not like egg yolk. It is yolk, and you've broken into the egg of a very, very dangerous bird. Let us leave this island fast. Let us leave. Don't let the boat stay here. So, of course, the sailors laughed it off and says, he's just being silly, he's just being paranoid, he's weak. And they did, of course, leave, but they were going at their own, at their own sweet time. And Sinbad was down, sleeping, trying to sleep off his worry and his tension. After a while, he heard screams and shouts from above. And then when he came up to the deck, he saw that the entire sky was shadowed by something huge, and it was falling on the boat. And when he looked up, he knew what to find. And sure enough, he found this huge bird, the Rock, and it was carrying this enormous boulder. And right on top of the boat, it let it go. Okay, so he knew he was expecting this. Sinbad was expecting this because they had actually broken and taken the egg of the bird, and the mother was taking out its revenge on them, and she dropped the boulder. It looked like it was moving in slow motion. It took a while for the boulder to reach them, but of course it came and smashed the boat into smithereens, and the sailors were all thrown out into the water, many of them lost, and Sinbad found himself, and luckily he found a piece of floating wood, and he could get to an island, one of the uninhabited islands. There were plenty in those waters. He lay unconscious for a while, and then when he woke up, he looked around and found himself in a place where there were trees with a lot of fruit, and he could satisfy his hunger. He took the fruit of the trees and the berries of the bushes, and he fed himself. But after some time, he realized that juice of the fruit wasn't enough to quench his thirst, and he was extremely thirsty. So he had to look around for fresh water, because of course seawater wasn't palatable. So he started looking around for streams and rivers, which invariably were found on these little islands. So he kept walking for a while, and then soon he found a stream, a very pretty stream, and a fairly large one. And he was just going to approach it to drink water when he saw a figure sitting at the edge of the river. And he was surprised because he thought that he had thought that it was an uninhabited island. So as he approached, he realized it was an old man, a very scrawny old man, and he was sitting at the river, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. So Sinbad approached him and very respectfully talked to him and asked him, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The man seemed to be mute. He didn't talk. He just looked at him, and he made a whole lot of gestures. So Sinbad tried talking to him again, but the man couldn't utter a single syllable. But then, with his gestures, he realized that he was asking Sinbad to take him on his shoulders and help him cross the stream. So Sinbad said, "Okay, fine, I should. And maybe if I do this, the God, Lord Allah, will help me and help me find a way out of this God-forsaken island. I have to get off. There's no boat, nothing to be seen. I need to get away from here." So he went and he lifted the scrawny old man and put him on his shoulders. And as he put him on his shoulders, he settled down. The old man didn't say anything. He held on, and he started crossing the stream. But as he started crossing the stream, he felt the legs of the old man almost snake-like. They wrapped around Sinbad, and he could feel them tightening. But then he thought the old man must be scared, he must be worried, and he crossed the stream. And when he got on to reached the other side, the other bank, he bent down, low, so that the old man could get off. But the old man didn't get off. Instead, he tightened vice-like legs around him and started beating him on his head and his ears so painfully that Sinbad cried out in pain. He didn't know that this scrawny old man had so much of strength in him. And he ordered him, "I need food, take me there." And he had to carry the old man to get food. And any time he resisted and said, "No, I'm tired," he would clutch and squeeze at his body, and he would feel like so many thorns were being poked into him, and he'd beat him on his head. And this continued the whole day, where he had to carry the old man and do as he asked him to do. Get him food, get him drink, do all kinds of things. And it was only late at night, when it was really very, very late, that Sinbad could eat a little food himself, a few of the berries, and the old man wouldn't get off. And just when he thought, at the first night he thought, okay, maybe when he's asleep I can throw this old man off. But it was like his legs had a mind of their own. It's like they were alive, and any time he tried to shake him off, it would tighten and torture him. So this continued for days, and Sinbad was at a loss. The only time he could eat some food would be late at night, and throughout the day, like the old man's slave, he would walk around carrying this burden on his back, and cursing himself inwardly. "I will never help another man in my life. I will never do it, this is torture." And Sinbad lost weight. He became scrawny while the old man prospered on him. And this continued until one day Sinbad found some gourd-like vegetables, fruit. And when the old man was asleep, he scraped the inside out and he put in some grapes that he found and let it ferment. He let it on for a few days. And sure enough, after a few days, as he would pass by that area doing work for this old man, when he opened it, he realized that it had changed into transformed into a very crude form of wine. So he would drink a little at night and feel a little better because of the kind of life he was leading, torturous life he was leading. And this continued for a few days until one day he thought the old man had fallen asleep on his back, but he hadn't. And he saw him drink from this gourd, and he said, "What is it? Give it to me. I want to drink it too." And he started beating him and torturing him again. So Sinbad gave him some, and he drank a little. Then he said, "Give me more." And he kept drinking. And as he kept drinking, and he started singing a very crude song, and Sinbad, I felt sorry for himself. Now this was the only form of pleasure I had. Now this creature has taken that away from me as well. But as he kept drinking and as he kept singing, he realized that the hold of his legs was getting a little weak. So he kept giving him more and more and more until the legs had lost their grip on Sinbad, and at that moment he pulled off the man. And it's a very gory end that is described. He throws him on the ground and then he uses a rock to beat him to death. And he rushes to the river and looks at himself, and he finds that he's become almost a skeleton, the kind of life that he had been leading until
Obviously.
then. He quickly ate some food and drank some water. He relaxed, and luckily for him, in the next couple of days, a ship happened to pass by, and he waved out, and they came and rescued him. Now, when he was on the ship recovering, and when he mentioned this horrible tale, what had happened to them, one of the sailors asked him, "Do you know who that was that you met?" And he says, "No, I have no idea. I'm still recovering from the whole thing." He says, "That is the old man of the sea, and he used to lure sailors and turned them into his slaves, and once they were very weak and they were almost dying, he would eat them up. He was a monster, and
Cannibal.
you have saved us from this monster. We can't thank you enough." And they gave him lots of food and drink, but Sinbad says, "I had the food, but I didn't touch the drink. I only had water." So that's where the story ends. But this is one story. I remember when I heard it the first time, I had many sleepless nights after this. Because
And
when
get
you
scared of old
scared-
people.
and not just the old, the thing is, when you help someone,
True.
be careful of whom you help. See, this story can be read in many the
Very
few that
true,
I have
very
understood.
true. Even when you tell children, you have to be
who you
helpful.
are helping, and adults
Absolutely,
also. Sometimes
yes,
the hand
yes.
you read, someone who you help might be the one who tortures
Yeah,
you and makes your
yeah,
life miserable
yeah.
because you don't know which monster is there. At the same time, that doesn't mean you don't help people.
Yes.
You do, but you have to be. You never know what is out there, and the
Yes.
most weakest, as the old man was a scrawny old man who turned out to be a vicious
Absolutely.
monster. So the forms that monsters take, and we're talking about human monsters, the most fearful monsters that we have.
Yes.
And this story was something, as I said, it impacted me so much, and I realized a simple story like this teaches you so much. Someone who appears to be very
Absolutely.
kind may not be who
Absolutely.
he or she is actually, the person who you see. So
I'm
this is
sure relatable in a lot of ways again.
exactly a lot. And this is just
Yeah.
like I said in the earlier episode, we said we've just scratched the surface. There are so many levels that the story can
Absolutely.
be, read on. So that's
Wonderful
my story.
I was actually visualizing the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Oh,
like
no.
Vikram and Vetal, like he was
Seriously,
carrying the old man.
but
on
at least the Veta left him and the story was told, and this is
Yeah,
scary, down
yeah.
there scary. So that was the Old Man of the Sea for you. We move on to the next one. This is
Super,
from
very
a tale-
nice story.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
nice one. This is from Africa, Africa, right? Deepti?
Yes.
The one that Deepti has for you. So Deepti, go on.
So my story for today is from Africa. It's a tale from Africa, from the kingdom of Kamara. So the king of Kamara was a very, very strong king. He was a great ruler, but he was so much, obsessed with himself. He felt he was very strong. He was the master of everything, and everybody would bow down to him. He always wanted people to listen to him and always to be below him. He wouldn't there was no situation wherein he would feel himself listening to somebody. It was always he who was above everything. So all his people, the courtiers, everybody used to be always submissive and listening to him all the time. So one such day in the court, he had called the entire country, everybody. He would meet his people, like every week there was a day where he would meet all his people, and everybody was gathered to listen to the king. And then, as usual, he would talk about himself and more of himself. He would just go on and on. And at the end of one of his speeches, he said, "I am the master of this country, and there's no one above me." So there was one scrawny little fellow, another old person, who just stood up from the crowd and said, "Sorry, king, please excuse me, but that's not the case." Entire palace just stood still for a few seconds, because this was the very first time anybody would have dared to speak up when the king, he was there. He was such, everybody knew he was so much about himself, and he wouldn't tolerate anything to be told against his words. So this old man who looks so weak and in rags, he had the guts to actually talk against the king. Everybody was shocked. And the king, he was enraged. He was, he flushed with anger. What? What are you saying? Are you saying that what I'm saying is not true, that I'm not the master? What are you saying? How dare you say that? So he said, King, please don't take me wrong. What I mean is, none of us, for that matter, is a master. To be very frank, we are all servants. We are all servants of each other. The whole mankind are servants of each other. This enraged him even more. Servant? For such a great king as me, you are using the word servant? How dare you? You will have to face the consequences for this. You are just going too much. So he said, I completely stand by what I said, king, and I can assure you that by tonight, by the end of the day, I will convince you with this. So he just calms down a bit and he says, you better, because if you don't, you will be beheaded at the end of the day. The time I'm giving you is that much. You can take your time, but I'm sure you're not going to convince me. It is just not possible that I can be called a servant in any way. But whatever it is, since you said so confidently, I'm going to give you time till the end of the day. Let's see. So he said, King, let me tell you something. I have come here for a very, very important reason. In my village, there is no water. People are dying. There is so much of thirst. No agriculture is being possible. There is no water at all in the village. So I have come here with a request. All this, what is happening right now is completely not planned. What I had actually come for is to have a well dug in our village. But, things went this way. But please don't take, revenge on what I said. Please get a well dug in our village. So he said, okay, in that case, I will have not one, but 3 wells dug in your village. Like I said, I continue with the challenge. If you convince me for what you said, I will have 3 wells dug in your village.
Okay.
But again, if you don't, you know what is going to happen. He said, okay, fine, I accept your challenge. But in our place, in our village, in our side of the country, we have a custom. Whenever we accept a challenge from somebody, we touch their feet. Am I allowed to do that, O great king? He said, definitely, you can. So he goes ahead. He has a small stick in his hand with the help of which he is walking. He's that weak actually. But we see how strong he is, inside. Though he is physically so weak. He goes up to the king and he tells the king, could you please hold this for me when I touch your feet? Sure. So he takes the stick from him and this old man touches the king's feet and he gets up and he says, now you may please give it back to me. And he returns the stick. And then he steps back and he says, King, do you need more proof? The king is confused. Proof? Proof of what? Of what I said. For the past 5 minutes, you were holding my stick. I am a nobody and you are the king. But in that situation, you were acting as somebody who's serving me. And when I asked you to give it back, you gave it back to me. You listened to me, listened to my orders. You could take it that way. So again, you were serving me. So this is what I wanted to convey to you, that at some point, we might all be each other's servants, or we might all be of help to each other. We all need each other at one point or other. So the king was completely taken aback, shocked at first, but then he broke into a smile and he said, this day, I will never forget this day in my life. I was so full of myself that I failed to realize, such an important lesson in life you have taught me. And he not only dug more than 3 wells, I'm sure, in the old man's village, but he invited the old man as one of his advisors into the court. It was such a important lesson that this nobody, otherwise a nobody, had taught a great king.
He transformed the king, no? A beautiful
Yeah,
story, very
absolutely.
beautiful story. Something so simple and yet such a big lesson in life. The
Yeah.
arrogance of the king was changed in such a nice way, you know.
In such a nice way, yeah. There
very
was no need of any big talk or
good.
anything.
Confrontation, nothing
Anything,
was there.
yeah. It was a small act which was so obvious, and simple things sometimes strike you when you just change the way you think, right?
And when you listen,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
when you're ready to listen,
Yeah.
you're ready to change.
that is,
That
a
is
beau-
most important.
that was a beautiful little tale.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our viewers like both the stories.
Yeah.
Yes.
Today's were two light ones for you to again sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, two small stories you could say with a lot of meaning,
And
with
depth
so
to
much
it.
so much to glean from. So we'll stop with that today, but we'll be back with more stories. Meanwhile,
Yes.
as we always say, we are open to
Feedback, suggestions,
Yes.
comments.
and
So please look out for this space. We have much more coming up
yeah,
your way.
do like, subscribe, and share.
Yes.
So until
So
the next story,
it's bye bye from Sugar and
Spice.
Spice.
Love you.
Love you all.